On this, I'm now joined by Dr. Salman Butt himself here in the studio. Tell us why you felt it was necessary to take this legal action concerning that press release with your name on it and what you hope to achieve.
Well, our intentions were manifold. I mean, first of all, I wanted to know why it is, I was mentioned on this press release. Over the last few years, we've seen, a growing number of Muslim speakers being smeared with this accusation of extremism. And there appears to be no due process, no accountability, and no redress as to whether they can challenge this or not. So
that you don't think the government have had any good reason whatsoever to label you as extremist? I mean, they must have some sort of reason. You describe yourself as an activist. But that's obviously not the same as an extremist. But what do you do exactly?
Well, I am the chief editor of Islam 21C. It's a leading online publication articulating Islam in the Western world. And we're very mainstream, orthodox kind of website. We try and articulate Islam as understood by the overwhelming majority of Muslims throughout the ages. What we've seen, unfortunately, though, is under the pretext of stopping people being drawn into organizations like ISIS, which everyone's against, the government has conflated membership with terror organizations and violence and breaking the law with non-violent, peaceful so-called extremism, which is basically activism.
Right, and that brings you on to the challenge over the PREVENT scheme. Obviously, the government does have a duty, does it not, to stop people being radicalised, and it's a very tricky job for the government to do. So what challenge are you making against the government concerning that?
We all agree that we don't want, a terrorist attack or some kind of political violence to unfold on the streets of London. But the problem with the current counter-extremism strategy and the narrative surrounding it is that it conflates political violence and actual acts of terrorism and their glorification with peaceful, non-violent activism and expression of beliefs or views which may run contrary to, orthodox
But these so-called hate preachers do exist, don't they?
They may, and they probably do, but my argument has always been that the cure to bad speech is not less speech, but more speech, for everyone to have a free market of ideas, for people to express views, even views that I disagree with or you disagree with, but so that other people can challenge those views in an open way, not to actually restrict the right of other people to express views that you or I might find contemptible.
Just finally, what about the Muslim community itself dealing with that problem? Clearly there are those being radicalised and going off to fight for jihadi groups. How they're being radicalised in all sorts of ways, not just through hate preaching or what's deemed as hate preaching. How does the Muslim community, and what are you doing to try and stop that?
This is one of the underlying premises of the problem with the counter-terrorism agenda of the last 10 years or so. It's grossly oversimplified the causes of political violence, the causes of terrorism. In spite of the overwhelming evidence in academia, in peer-reviewed literature, of a person's path towards political violence being a complicated, interconnected social phenomenon, they've oversimplified it to saying ideology, this kind of extreme radical ideology, causes terrorism. And then they unfortunately look for expressions of that ideology, somebody growing a beard, someone wearing a hijab, so forth, as markers or indicators for somebody being on some kind of path or conveyor belt towards violence, which is deeply flawed. And this is one of the reasons I wanted to challenge this. I wanted this to be challenged in court.
Well, no doubt we'll be following that very closely. You're challenging court, what, next in October, I believe, is that when you'll be making the first...
Yes, that's when the next hearing is.
Dr. Salman Butt, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you very much.